Hi, I'm Gina Neff, and thank you for being a part of this virtual ICA. We've heard some incredible papers on this panel, and I want to take a slight pivot to talk about how data science promises to social scientists a kind of openness, how we might challenge that in reality and practice, and what a call for action might look like moving forward. So we don't need any introduction to the fact that at this particular moment, large-scale data is being used to make life and death decisions around the world in the COVID-19 crisis. What has been a theoretical concern of what assumptions are being used to build models that make decisions and power action is now something that is a part of our daily headlines. What I bring to this conversation is an approach of having spent time working with data science studies, the study of data science, and having just completed a textbook that will come out next year with MIT Press on human-centered data science. How can we take what we know from critical interpretive perspectives and use that to build a new kind of vision for large-scale science? I'll focus today specifically on the questions around openness. So in practice, data science sees openness as one of its main goals. When I started field work, this was one of the key concerns that data scientists voiced back at us. But in practice, open science and data science is very difficult, and I would say that's for 4 reasons. First, the relationship between the population and the sample is not always clear. Of course, large-scale data aspires to do population-level work, right? That we no longer need to simply sample, but we're describing or predicting something that is true across a population or can be done for every individual across population. However, who is in that data set and who is not, and this work has been done very well by others, is not always clear. And so that makes it difficult for others then to do reproducibility and engage in open science practices. Second, the assumptions that are used to build models are almost never clear and transparent to others outside. The way that these assumptions get made are not necessarily about necessarily at every step about societal bias, although they end up having implications of racial, gender inequalities and bias. So the assumptions that get built into models are not always clear to outsiders, making it difficult to tease out what was actually done, the choices that were made. The third way is that toolkits get repurposed within projects, and it's not always clear which toolkits are used, which version of toolkits are used, why they're used, and how they're used. And so we think about a data science pipeline of being many choices, many small actions, many things that happen to create a result, and that's often a combination of parts that are very difficult later then to tease out. The documentation needed for open science is the 4th reason. And in practice, many data science projects aspire to share models and share data. In practice, they often don't come with the required documentation that would be needed to reproduce those models. So there's 3 ways that the context of data science also makes openness quite difficult, and certainly quite different and distinct from the rhetoric around large-scale data being open and open to others. So the first is that in many models, reproducibility is pragmatically impossible. Several scholars have shown that it's not simply the data that one needs access to, and it's not simply the model or the algorithm that one needs access to, but it's actually the combination of those two in the context of the choices that were made that end up shaping what a result might be at a particular time. This makes it almost impossible in practice to then reproduce results. The second, and this is one that is of interest to many communication scholars is the power imbalance between closed platforms and closed data. And it means that making open science is actually rare. So we've had very high profile cases in which there have been calls on platforms to make available data that was at one point openly available on the open web that doesn't get shared in ways that can be used by other scientists. The second is that it's often, even in projects, there are parts of uniqueness, of novelty in how data are chosen, shaped, and queried that make it difficult for that to be reproduced by others. And third, the training sets and the choices that are made in selecting the items for training sets are often not transparent to others. And so without the requisite documentation, without knowing what went in, we have another component that gets built into these systems that makes it difficult for others. So in my remaining minutes, I would just like to put forward essentially a way that we can step up to the epistemic challenges that are happening with large-scale data being seen as somehow less biased, more open, more able for others to participate in, and those of us who are coming from different perspectives, what might we do to bridge that gap? So the first is I've been lucky to be a part of the growing movement of social data science studies, which thinks about how data science works in practice, and we can use those lessons to improve data science. The work on documentation, I think, is key here, that we see how documentation practices are really shaped. The second are studies that help with contextual and in-depth subject knowledge. That's often hard for data science teams to have, and that's something that we as social scientists often can bring. The third is working with data science to come up with ways to produce the frameworks for sharing models, data, and pipelines. Our traditions in social science seem often quite difficult or different to those who work from computational practices. The fourth is, how can we work to improve documentation practices and really see documentation as a part of openness? How can we help show that this value of leaving the breadcrumbs for others helps improve the practice of data science? And then five, and something that's very close to the work that I've been doing, is building contestability into models and pipelines. How can we open pipelines so that people can question them and question the assumptions in them and be transparent in those ways? So there are 3 papers I'll point you to. We have the forthcoming book next year on human-centered data science. My student Anissa Tanweer's dissertation is available on data science of the social. And then with Anissa, we wrote, and others, we wrote a paper in big data called Critique and Contribute. And that would be another source for this. Thank you. Enjoy your conference.